And good, well, it's still morning. So good morning from Philadelphia. Frank here with another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. We're ready to go here. We got a fantastic guest. And let's go to my co-host, Chant Hannah, to do the honors. Let's go, Chant.
Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate your having this wonderful guest on today. It's going to be a very special show. We have Dr. Michael Paul Masters, and he's a professor of biological anthropology at Montana Tech in Butte, Montana, where he is researching hominin evolutionary anatomy, archaeology, biomedicine, astrobiology, and the physics of time and time travel. He has spent over 2 decades examining a theory the UFO phenomenon could be our distant human descendants, returning from the future to study us in their own evolutionary past. After receiving a PhD in anthropology from Ohio State University, Dr. Masters spent the following decade uniting multiple scientific disciplines to create a hypothesis regarding this unexplained phenomenon. Remaining vigilant in his own skepticism, Dr. Masters continues this research about UFOs with a method of inquiry firmly rooted in science and the principles of parsimony. Dr. Masters' nonfiction science book, Identified Flying Objects, a multidisciplinary scientific approach to the UFO phenomenon, challenges readers to consider new possibilities about our ever-evolving understanding of time and time travel. Please welcome Dr. Michael Paul Masters to our show.
Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you for being on with us, Doctor.
Absolutely.
I wanted to jump right into it and ask you a question. It might be a little long, but I'll go ahead and bring up the updated Drake equation. I know that you're familiar with the Drake equation.
Sure.
How does your theory on extratempestrials from the future fit into this equation, if at all?
Well, I mean, it is an important question as to whether or not there's extraterrestrial life elsewhere in the universe, and there's very certainly is. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't happen elsewhere, considering that it happened here and so quickly after it could. The book and the research in the book mostly focuses on how, even if there is life on other planets, it isn't likely to have anything to do with the UFO phenomenon. And I list a number of reasons rooted in largely evolutionary biology and aspects of the specific hominin evolutionary history of our own species and our own unique past, both culturally and biologically, and how those things are not too likely to happen the exact same way they did here, that we would get upright walking bipedal forms who can communicate with us in our own languages, who have technology that is advanced beyond ours, but is most likely built on top of what we see now in modern times, and having similar characteristics even beyond bipedalism, the 5 digits on each hand and foot, having eyes, a brain in the same place, both slightly larger than our own, seems to indicate that they are just simply us from the future. So in looking at the Drake equation and the probability of life on other planets, it's almost a tangential question, I guess, that it's important to know, it's important to research this. But in the context of the UFO phenomenon, I don't think, and I offer a lot of support, evidence to back up that it probably doesn't have anything to do with extraterrestrial life, at least in the way it's been conceptualized previously.
Fantastic. And just for our listeners' sake, so they understand a little bit behind what I'm asking, the equation was written in 1961 by Frank Drake, not for purposes of quantifying the number of civilizations, but as a way to stimulate the scientific dialogue at the first scientific meeting on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is SETI. And also, the Drake equation. Go ahead, Doctor, please.
Oh, I was just going to point out, too, that an important part of the Drake equation, which I also mentioned in the book, is his L variable. You know, he talks about the likelihood that there would be other stars with planets that are habitable, where life could emerge, where intelligent life could emerge. But then his L factor in the equation is how long a civilization would exist and exist in a capacity where we would be able to communicate with them. And that's an important factor. It's not just whether or not this could happen again somewhere else, but whether or not it could happen on a planet close enough to us and at the same time. And sorry to interrupt it. You may have been about to touch on that anyway, but I think it's important to consider that too. There has to be a synchronicity, a temporal consistency if there was to be another humanoid alien creature on a different planet somewhat close to us.
Well, and also, I want to remind you, I need you to interrupt me at any time, because this interview is all about you. So anytime I'm talking, please do. I encourage you to please interrupt me. And I'm glad you said that, because part of your interrupting me really enlightens the listeners regarding your perspectives and how you feel about something. So I look forward to you interrupting me while I'm talking, because we're learning more about what you have to say. No, that's fine. Please don't. Actually, it's a much more lively discussion that way. Also, I just wanted to let our listeners know, aside from doing research on the L equation that the doctor brought up so eloquently, the other part folks need to know is the Drake equation puts a numeric value to the likelihood, as the doctor was saying, extraterrestrial, especially intelligent life, exists anywhere other than Earth. Also, separate from that hypothesis, math on the lowest estimate for stars in the Milky Way, 100 billion. The current estimate is there are 1 billion Earth-like planets and 100,000 intelligent civilizations in our galaxy. Doctor, is your theory on ETs from the future sort of a unified theory of everything regarding ETs in general?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it adds clarity to a lot of the specific aspects of this phenomenon with regard to things like who they are, what they're doing here, why they're doing these things, why they're so consistently reported doing the same types of things. But it's not something that, until we have full disclosure and the opportunity to really converse with these individuals ourselves and to ask questions, there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions. And I don't claim to have all of the answers by any stretch of the imagination. All I can do is synthesize available evidence, what we have now, what we know now, and also be very forthright about what we can't know now. And I feel like a big part of this book was trying to just present a model that can explain as much as possible, but also acknowledge that there's a lot of things that are going to take time before we do really fully comprehend it.
I have a yes or no question for you, Doctor, because I have quite a few questions to run through. So I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind allowing me the privilege of asking you a yes or no question.
Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. My question is regarding your book. Do you plan on updating it at any point in your lifetime?
Yes.
Okay. Also, is it safe to assume the whole reason why ETs are coming to us from the future is due to a dire situation we are headed towards now?
I mean, maybe at some point in the future we could back ourselves into a corner or create some scenario that's not ideal, but I'm sure they're also aware that there's no way to change the future. If they have such a mastery of time, and based on what we know regarding time and the physics of time specifically, it doesn't seem like they would put efforts into really trying to change things unless they had already have been doing that, which is a very obscure answer to that question, I guess. But no, I mean, certainly if you look at recent trends, we have climate change problems, pollution problems, and I mentioned in the book some aspects of just things that we don't necessarily put a lot of emphasis on, but could be potential problems in the future related to genetic homogenization, where we don't have separate interbreeding populations around the world anymore. Since the early stages of European colonialism, we've all sort of been amalgamated into one large interbreeding population, to the extent that Earth has become simply one population of humans. So there could be aspects of that in the future in which a way to alleviate some of the problems of inbreeding and an increase in homozygous recessive traits, which are largely what causes the problems that stem from inbreeding. It may be that they are sampling gametes from the past, taking sperm and egg samples from individual groups, haplotypes that didn't persist into the future as a way of introducing novel genes and helping to eliminate some problems with the state of global incest, essentially. So there may be aspects of the phenomenon where it's coming back to intervene in some way that helps their own situation, but I don't know if there's maybe at some point in the future, but as of right now, I don't think there's a lot of evidence that they're really trying to change anything. And if you look at most of the modern physics research would indicate that there really is no way to change the past. It's all already a part of this massive block time. All moments within the universe and with all time exist simultaneously. So if they're moving in and around these different slices of block time, they're already a part of that past. We're already a part of them in the future in this long history of connections across space-time. So I don't know. I mean, that's another one of those questions that I guess will take a while to answer. What is the ultimate goal of these missions to the past? Is it just to learn more about humanity and our long history as a species and the way I would investigate the past as a paleoanthropologist today? Or, is there some more functional aspect to it that they're trying to help with some problems that they're experiencing and that only time and visiting different periods of time can help with? So I'd be excited to really know the answer to that question too, but it may be a while before we actually do have answers to that.
Yeah, that actually led up to another question I had. So you might have to repeat yourself because I do still want to ask that question, but I'm sure you'll still have other thought processes to share with us. So before I ask this question, let me preface it with a story that I wanted to share with you. It's called the Mimsy were the Borogoves. I'm sorry. Do you remember that Mimsy story? They did a movie on it. It's about millions of years in the distant future. A post-human scientist is attempting to build a time machine and tests it by sending a box with the hastily gathered batch of educational toys into the past. Eventually, really what happens is this box of toys, which is built on technology from that period of time, millions of years in the future, kids find it. And these kids that find these toys, in a way, luckily for them, their parents are overly preoccupied with their own lives. Yet they do manage to notice a few unusual things going on with their children. The point is, the kid's psychologist suspects that these toys are are of extraterrestrial origin. They're definitely from the future. This box from the future changes their lives. That's a fascinating story I wanted our listeners to look up, and I was hoping you actually knew about that story. But either way, I wanted to ask you, can ETs coming from the future into our own timeline result in a confusing situation for ourselves in our current and future timeline? Now, you already sort of answered that question, but as you know, science fiction is all over this topic with movies and stories. And by the way, that story I just read a little bit about to you was from 1943.
That's cool.
Yeah, I wanted to know, again, are you sure, and I think I already know your answer, but are you sure that ET's coming into our timeline? Can it change anything for us whatsoever just by their action of observing us? I know that goes into quantum theory possibly, but wanted to know, again, your answer on that.
Well, it's more of an aspect of the word change.
Okay.
In saying change, it indicates that there was some other timeline that existed before. And that's not necessarily the case. There are ways in which the future can dictate events in the past. If the future, present, and the past are all one, and none of them are ahead of or behind the other one in the presence of a time machine, then they all are part of the same timeline. And,
Okay,
and
yes.
in that sense, you can't change anything. It's always existed. If you are a part of the past, you've always been a part of that past and always will be, even before you go. It's non-disruptive. Anything that you did in that past has already time shifted as that person coming back from the future. So there's no real, it's just that word change, I guess, that's problematic. But no, you can absolutely have things that exist in the past that are caused by something in the future. And that's what challenges people the most, I think, about really digging through the weeds of this extratempestrial hypothesis, is we're used to thinking of the past dictating what happens in the future, that there's this cause and effect that exists and is very understandable to us in linear time. And even from a young age, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, we're doing these exercises to put things in order, where kids are shown pictures and they have to say, well, this happened before that, which happened before that. But in the presence of a time machine, those things cease to exist in that capacity. You can have instances of things from the future influencing things in the past that then create this consistent loop throughout those seemingly separated but also integrated blocks of block time or landscape time, those different parts of it. So yeah, there's definitely ways in which you can have these time travelers confusing situations. I feel like that's exactly what's happening. That's why we're all confused about this phenomenon, is they're interjecting themselves into past periods at a time when we don't understand who they are, what they're doing here, why they're doing these things. And because they're ubiquitously seen coming down from the sky, it's natural to assume that they must be from a different planet somewhere else, that they're coming from space. So I think it has confused us in that sense. And there are ways in which things that they do in the past could leave some trace leading into the future. If the Roswell crash really did occur and they were from the future, and we were suddenly gifted technology from a distant point in our cultural evolutionary future, then that can certainly help create those same things that eventually will come crashing back into 1947 again. So there's this, again, self-consistency across those different periods of time. And I discuss this a lot in the book because I think it's very important, this aspect of what are typically referred to as paradoxes. But in the context of Nabokov's self-consistency principle, and most of his colleagues have backed this up in numerous papers in both modern physics and quantum mechanics, but there is an inherent self-consistency. It's not even something we choose to do. So if you, for instance, if you went back in time and met yourself at age 5, we know with absolute certainty that when you grow up to be that age that you remember seeing yourself at age 5, you will go back in time and visit yourself at age 5. You will always do that because you always have done that. It's just the moment structured that way. And those two events that are separated across different regions of block time are still integrated and always will be. So yeah, I think it's the time in itself is confusing, and there's a lot of ways in which them coming back through time has and will continue to for a while add confusion to our own sense of reality and evolutionary biology and cultural evolution. But I think I feel like over time, as our technology evolves and our ability to understand aspects of our own existence and things like consciousness and just more about the brain in general, I think we'll start to piece this together, and it'll all start to become much more lucid.
I'm glad you brought that up, Doctor, regarding the Nabokov self-consistency principle. I'll cover that in just a second. Also, I'm glad that you covered the possible, because you did acknowledge, I'm pretty sure I heard you acknowledge a little bit, that there could be sort of, and these aren't your words, but my translation, that there could be some echoes or ripple-like effects of what another person may have said or done in the past, possibly. The Nabokov self-consistency principle the doctor brought up, just so everybody can look that up, that is N as in no, O, V as in Victor, I-K-O-V, self-consistency principle. That is also known as the Nabokov self-consistency conjecture and a law of conservation of history. And that was developed by Russian physicist Igor Novikov in the mid 1980s. And he intended it to solve the problem of paradoxes in time travel, which doctors so carefully covered. In philosophy, Doctor, I wanted to bring this up to you. Ideology is a science of ideas, the study of their origin and nature. Now, ideology politically is a totally different definition,
Right.
and also as a noun, it's different. But in philosophy, it's the science of ideas, the study of their origin and nature. Does your ETs from the future hypothesis fall under this categorization? And if yes or no, why?
Yeah, I think it does. It's just it's an idea, and it's the study of ideas. It synthesizes modern knowledge and ideas from a lot of different fields to put forth a new, somewhat more amalgamated idea that draws from these different places. So yeah, I would say that it does fall into that category as you defined it in the context of logic and philosophy. Absolutely.
Right. Okay, well, as a noun, it is defined as the body of doctrine, myth, belief that guides an individual, a social movement, institution, class, or large group. So if it was thought along that idea as a noun, defined as a body of doctrine, myth, belief, that kind of thing, that guides an individual, a social movement, institution, class, or large group, does this make you an ideologist regarding your thought process that ETs are from the future? Because it appears as though this hypothesis is what you're basing your research on. Now, I know that sounds obvious. I'm just asking, does this make you an ideologist in that regard?
Well, I don't know. I mean, in a way, the model really isn't based on this phenomenon too. In fact, I've said before that you can remove the whole UFO, the reports and the different accounts, close encounters and abduction reports, and it still can stand on its own because it looks at long-term evolutionary changes in the hominid lineage, both related to our biological evolution and our cultural evolution, and looks at how, even in spite of changing environments and climates and humans moving into different parts of the world and having to deal with different predator-prey relationships and social changes and political and economic changes, these same enduring trends of neurocranial globularity, encephalization, increased brain size throughout most of that period, a reduction in facial anatomy, an increase in paedomorphic characteristics, or what is the retention of juvenilized traits into adulthood, things like, since agriculture even, things like self-domestication, craniofacial feminization. It's not making predictions about what types of things will influence us in the future. It very much stays away from any sort of speculation into that, but it just looks at these enduring trends throughout the hominin past and how if those were to continue into the future, this is kind of what we would look like and kind of be like. And that just so happens to be the same form that is so commonly reported in these instances of close encounter. So it ties this into that phenomenon, but it certainly doesn't hinge on it, I wouldn't say. But yeah, I mean, under that definition of a movement of trying to gain knowledge on a broader societal level, I would say it kind of does. And sometimes, little slight variations in the definition or for the same word can be very different. It kind of reminds me of the term academic. It means both relating to scholarship and learning and education, but also something that really doesn't have any relevance in a functional sense. It's only theoretical interest. And if you look at those two definitions for the same word, they kind of seem to be almost in conflict with one another. And
yes,
I used that term in my website. I think on there it says a multidisciplinary academic approach to the UFO phenomenon. And I actually laughed a little when I did that. It was partly because I ran out of letters and I couldn't put the word scientific in there. It wouldn't fit and the website wouldn't let me do it. But so I used academic and kind of chuckled to myself about that because it's basically saying that this is educational and scholarship, but also it's right. Theoretical and conceptual and unpragmatic, I guess you could say. But No, yeah, I guess in both senses of the word, it would be an ideology, at least as far as what you just explained regarding
Okay.
that, the definition of that.
And I'm glad you made that connection regarding what I just said and why I separated the word in that manner, the concept I brought up to you. Do you believe in carnation, Doctor? Because Dr. David Jacobs says he has had patients who claim through hypnotic regression sessions to be ETs from the future. So do you believe in reincarnation?
I do, actually. Yeah, I don't discuss that in the book, and I don't really have anything to back it up other than my own personal experiences, which is anecdotal, and we certainly try to avoid that in scientific studies. But no, I personally believe, and this is just my own personal belief system, that when we die, we're reincarnated as ourselves at the time of birth, and that quintessential light at the end of the tunnel is just the lights in the hospital room when we come back into the world at the very beginning and live the same life over and over for all of eternity. And the reason that I've come to that conclusion for my own purposes is because I have very intense deja vu, and I see things from the future that play out exactly as I dreamt them. And it indicates to me that I've lived this life over and over, and these things in my future are already a part of that, and I catch little glimpses of it through my subconscious in a dreaming state, which also indicates to me that consciousness isn't really bound by the same rules of space and time that our physical forms are. And so, yeah, that's kind of the best way I've been able to explain this very real phenomenon that I experience in a pretty regular basis, actually, is in the context of reincarnation as ourselves. At the time we die, going back to the time we start.
Well, I have to ask you a little bit more on that, what you just said, if you don't mind, and if you don't want to expound on it, that's fine. But I just want to make a statement. I have interviewed, and I counted, Frank, by the way, to verify this, about 70 people within the last, within a 3-month period of time. And I have to tell you, out of all of the people I've interviewed, you have to be one of the most unique folks in regards to the manner in which you share your perspectives, your thought processes. Just you astound me all the time, Doctor, whenever I talk to you. I've interviewed you a few times now. But wanted to talk to you about this reincarnation idea that I brought up. And the reason why I bring it up is this. If there are ETs from the future visiting us, strangely, is it possible for you or I to be one of them? I guess that's the best way to put it. And how would that all work?
Yeah.
I've been sort of burning to ask you this question for a long time, so I'm glad I've had the opportunity to.
Oh yeah, I enjoy that. It's kind of
directed at you.
Yeah, it's a mind-bending question, to say the least. I guess at some point in our future, if, say this is just a hypothetical, but say tomorrow they decide that we have gained a collective consciousness that would allow us to understand who they are and what they're doing without some sort of H.G. Wells, Orson Welles type of public panic, then if there is disclosure and there's interaction across different periods of time, and we continue into the future, say, we're in our late 70s or 80s or something, and people are picking each other up from different periods of time, even though we don't have the technology to do it ourselves by the time we get to be at an advanced age, if there is connection among different periods, people coming from the future who do have that technology, there's really no reason why they couldn't pick somebody up from any other period and take them to a past period that predates the creation of their own time machine. So I guess, and that would be awesome, and I hope that is the case, because it would be super cool to get picked up by yourself in the future and just go whizzing around time and checking out different periods of
Right.
time. And I
You
would love
could,
that opportunity.
yeah, you could be your own Uber and tip yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, what I do is I study the past. That's what anthropology, a big part of anthropology, biological paleoanthropology specifically, is to investigate our human past. So if somebody from the future was looking to pick somebody up and take them back to see that past directly, I would be the first to volunteer for that. I think that would be awesome. And I mentioned this early in the book that we, in doing archaeology and studying past hominins, we have skeletal material, fossils, teeth, but we don't have the ability yet to just observe them and to watch them and see what they do. And we could learn so much more in that capacity. We wouldn't have to argue amongst ourselves about the origins of agriculture or different major events in human history and how we interpret the symbolism of past groups. We could just look at it, look how they use these the what we find today, what we refer to as material remains. We could know directly what those things did, what their function was, what their symbolism was to these people if we could just simply watch them. So yeah, I think that would be awesome. I don't know. I mean, it depends on at what point there'll be some sort of intertemporal disclosure. I think that would have to happen first. There's also, even though, like I mentioned, it's not possible to change the past, it certainly complicates things. There's no doubt about that. What would be the effects on the stock market or any number of other things that we've come to just accept as normal in our society? It would definitely force us to reconsider a lot of preconceived notions about our humanity if that were to happen. And I think that could be dangerous in some capacity, so that it may be a while before there is any sort of intertemporal disclosure. But if it did happen, yeah, I think that would be great to be a part of that and to be able to move through time with them.
I wanted to let our listeners know one other reason why I felt, and I feel the way about Dr. Masters that I do regarding him being so unique about his answers and his perspectives. And just want to go ahead and cover this a little bit, Doctor. The last interview I had with you about being a hunter and coming across aliens, and you're just so happen to have a weapon on you, which as a hunter naturally you would. I wanted to bring up a question I brought up to you and let our listeners know what your answer was, just so they can understand how unique you are regarding how you view the UFO topic at times. So our last interview, I asked you, if you secretly spy an ET presence abducting people, what do? Do you run, go protect your family? Do you strategize to help those being abducted? Perhaps you have a different answer. So I basically had a really loaded leading question there for you in different ways, and you completely sidestepped it. And what you said was, I would consider actually helping the ETs with their science project, essentially. Isn't that correct, Doctor?
Yeah, I remember that actually very well. Yeah, I said I would go help them. And you
Right.
said, oh, you would go help the people being abducted. I said, no, I would go help the people doing the abducting.
Exactly.
I would want to be a part of that research mission and be a part of what I think are probably anthropologists from the future, biologists, medical professionals studying aspects of our past physiology and any number of things about us. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily a sidestep, I wouldn't say, but definitely an answer that probably isn't all that common to that question.
Right, you're accurate, 100%. Thank you for correcting me on that, Doctor. I wanted to bring up the topic of hypnotic regression, channeling, and remote viewing regarding the ET topic. We hear about these topics a lot: hypnotic regression, channeling, and remote viewing. What are your thoughts on those topics?
I think it's going to be the next big area of scientific research. Unfortunately, as with studies of the UFO phenomenon, cryptozoology, and things that are considered to be on the fringe, there's still a lot of stigma surrounding that, and there's certainly a lot of stigma around remote viewing. And but honestly, like I said just a little bit ago, if consciousness isn't bound by the same rules that govern physical entities, things with mass, essentially matter, in the physical universe, then there really isn't any reason why consciousness couldn't be used in that way. Why we couldn't? It's going to be a while, I think, before we really figure out how to do it in a meaningful way. People claim that they're able to do remote viewing. I think the CIA even had a program where they were trying to use that as a form of spying. I could be wrong about that. It's not my main research focus, but I do remember seeing something about that. But I also don't think our brains really have the capacity or the ability to do that in the way some people claim to be able to. With that said, I certainly think that they're telling the truth, that there is an early stage ability for the brain to do these things, telepathy and just connecting with people on an energetic level and in a way that really is just rooted in consciousness and the energy that people exchange. It seems like over time that'll probably become more developed, and we could be in the early stages of that. But it's going to take, for it to be science, for it to be scientifically falsifiable and testable, I think it's going to take some development of equipment that doesn't exist yet, technologies, ways to really study the brain and the energy associated with the brain and really understand consciousness. I don't think we fully understand consciousness yet, but I think in the future that'll be a really interesting area of study. And if I continue to investigate fringe science, I guess that's something I would like to get into more. I find it fascinating, and I think there's probably a way to create testable hypotheses centered around hypnotic regression and remote viewing, and I think it would be a really cool thing to study going forward.
Yeah, I think what you were referring to is the Project MK Ultra.
Yeah, that was it.
Right, and that was a CIA mind control program, which encompassed so many tragic events in human history that were at times illegal, and I would say the entire project was highly immoral. Yeah, I just also want to mention to our viewers just something interesting, and that is, I think it was 1980, a media outlet by the name of the Fifth Estate was able to reveal part of that tragedy in Canada. Okay, Doctor, wanted to ask you a little bit more about the ET topic. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you, do you plan, it's just sort of a surprise question, do you plan on having another book in the future?
Am I allowed to expand upon whether or not there'll be a revised version of this?
Yes,
or would that
we
have
would
to
love
just be yes
to
or
hear
no?
that. Oh my God.
Well, I wasn't sure. You told me it was a yes or no question, so I didn't want
Right?
to violate any rules.
Stay within the parameters of that. No. Please,
Okay,
please let us know.
No, one thing that's been really cool about the last couple of months, I mean, I published it just over a month ago, but I've been talking about this for a while. And one thing that's been really interesting is hearing from people who know more about specific things that are discussed in the book than I do. And I mean, I'm combining multiple different scientific disciplines to do this. I'm obviously an anthropologist, so I have a deeper knowledge of that particular field, and the book centers more on anthropological research because of that. And I think it's the most relevant to really understanding this extratempestrial hypothesis. But I've been getting emails from people who are former intelligence agents, numerous people that worked at Los Alamos Research Center, physicists, and they've been filling in some gaps for me, little pieces of the puzzle that I just didn't really have the ability to put in place yet when I published the book. And it's been really fun to get this information from people who understand this model well enough in the way I explain it in the book to be able to notice that there's something that I just hadn't quite fully grasped. And then they've been filling me in on these things, and it's been awesome. And I don't have any sort of narcissistic ideas of having the perfect product here. I've always referred to it as an evolving project, because things like that, I just can't know. We can't know as a human race at this particular point in time. So I've been really
That's an
excited
interesting choice of words, narcissistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for researchers to think they have everything figured out and that they're great and I know everything and see everything, but that's not the case, and that's not what science is. We're constantly just evolving our models with new information as it becomes available. So in getting this new information, and I've started keeping a folder where I put these, I kind of write them out in my own words or just copy and paste what people have said. And I think it would be great to update the book at some point with this knowledge and possibly bring these people in if they're able to or willing to talk about them in their own words. I think that would be a great way to revise the book. But no, to answer your original question, I'm not a huge fan of writing, which is funny as to say as an author. I really like discussing things and digging deeply into things and the research aspects of it, especially in researching time and the physics of time. That was a really fun part of writing this book. I would leave my office many days and just feel like I wasn't even a part of this reality at times, because you get exposed to these ideas that really challenge you to think about things in such different ways that it takes you out of space-time completely. And I think that's what people like about reading and going to the movies and things too, is that it for a moment you can leave your own reality and go into this other reality. And I've recently, maybe a surprise to people, but I never really liked science fiction until recently. And I've just been getting into it, and I've really enjoyed that part of it, where you can go on these little brain adventures with whoever wrote the story and the producers and everybody. So I think that part of writing the book was a lot of fun, and I would enjoy doing that and researching something else as deeply as I had researched this over the last 7 years. But I don't have any plans in the near future to really jump back into that at the present time anyway.
Well, thank you for answering that question, and thank you for going into detail regarding all that. It was fascinating to hear from you. And also, I think Frank, my co-host, has a few questions of his own for you.
I do, and I know that we had a brief conversation over at the Facebook group resulting from an article I think that was in the Atlantic regarding scientific journal articles and our published papers becoming somewhat of an anachronism. You kind of jumped in there and had some comments about the about the scientific journal industry in general. And I was wondering if you wanted to expand on that, because I thought your comments were really interesting.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm sure my views haven't really changed that much.
Yeah, you didn't
then,
like
so
it. I remember that much. I thought that was interesting. So
well,
I've talked to a few. They really want to get published bad, and you seem to have an outlier opinion on it. So I want to hear all about it.
Well, mostly what my qualm is with the journal industry is that we as researchers work our butts off. I don't know what the FCC rules are for this show, but I'll still keep it PG. Work our butts off to conduct these studies, and we do research, and we receive grants for these oftentimes, not in all cases, but so there is a little bit of money coming in. The institutions we work for get a big percentage of that, but some of it does come back to us. But when we publish, we are submitting this work, oftentimes years and years of work, to these journals, and they take that material that we have provided them, they take ownership of it, they publish it, they make millions and millions of dollars off of it, and we get zero income from that. And it's not just the research, but also they have us as peer reviewers. There was a period of time when I was publishing a lot of papers, and I sort of became some sort of international expert on the evolution of our midfacial anatomy and the eyes and the orbits specifically, and the interaction with the frontal lobe and the brain. And so I was getting requests to review papers that had been submitted to journals within that specific area of science almost weekly. There were times when I was reviewing 3 or 4 papers at a time, and it requires a lot of work to read those papers, then to write our response to it, our actual review that then gets sent back to the original author, the researchers. Sometimes they'll revise it, and we have to read those parts again. And we get paid $0 for that. You get no income from providing this very valuable service that these journals rely on. They need us to do that, but they don't compensate us for it. And I feel that the way in which researchers are manipulated by these huge journals that are making millions, if not billions of dollars off of selling our products and our hard work and our research is really a flaw in the system. And I believe the University of California system, I don't know the details, I should have looked this up, but I believe they actually have been boycotting certain journals, some of the largest ones, because of this discrepancy in the way that researchers are manipulated. And I don't know what the actual numbers are, but it's got to be tens of millions of dollars that they'd be losing by not being included in the University of California system and all of the different schools that make up the UC system. But I think it's going to take that for the industry to change. I think it's going to take institutions standing up and researchers standing up and saying, you know, we'd like a share of the profits here, because we don't get paid a lot to start with. People think that professors make a lot of money, but we actually don't. And in fact, many professors, especially ones that teach engineering and material sciences and things like that, could make a lot more money in private industry than they could in the education system, the higher education system. So if there was fair compensation by these journals for the work that we do, I think it would help bolster research. I think it would help really change the system in a way that's mutually beneficial, even though they would be losing a little bit of profit and their shareholders may not be entirely happy about that. I think it's only equitable, and it needs to happen, in my opinion. I'm not the only one that's jaded about this by any means.
Oh, yeah, Doctor, I'm sorry. I was just totally listening to you, involved with what you were saying.
It was a bit of a tangent.
No,
I could see if you spaced out there at some point, because it was a bit of a tangent. It bothers me. I don't like it, but
it's interesting to me because I do look at papers once in a while, now and again, and usually I can get through the abstracts relatively unscathed. You know, I can understand most of it.
One of the things I really like about your site is how often you do reference actual published research, peer-reviewed research. I think that's great. It's great to see on your site.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, sometimes, you know, these papers will get picked up by media, and sometimes they'll be accurate in terms of recounting the contents of the paper, and sometimes they won't. I think it's always best to go back to the original source whenever possible. And sometimes the papers are interesting to read. Like I said, I can get through some of them pretty unscathed. So it's something that maybe you're not going to understand everything in a paper, but you know what? Stretch yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and it's good. You know, Google some words, learn something. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I like too is that you'll add the direct quote from it in one of the more poignant parts of an article. And you're right, it's important to do that because things can get twisted so quickly, and it's almost like a game of telephone. I've watched this happen with my own research. I've seen some articles in French recently. I happen to speak French, so I enjoy reading those. And the translations are usually very good, and the ideas translate well. But there's been some media outlets in the U.S. And Australia. I've seen one in England as well, where it's the same language, but they sort of twist some things around to the point where it's not even something I said or would have said. One that bothers me is the word proof. I've never, we don't use the word proof in science.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as proof. There's evidence and there's statistical analyses, and you can back things up, and we have statistical tests to provide some indication of the validity of an idea or a relationship, but there's no such thing as proof. And I've seen that word used in reference to what I've been doing, and it does kind of bother me, because I would never ever use that word or claim to have any sort of proof of anything. That's not what we do. So yeah, no, I think it's great to always go back to the original source and to use that in science communication as much as possible.
Doctor, I wanted to bring up a topic that's sort of related to the academic journal issue you brought up. And it's an article that was written not that long ago. It's called The Fallacy of Open Access Publication, and I'll provide the link to our listeners for that in a moment. But in this article, it says publishers are getting rich on the backs of underfunded academic libraries and unpaid labor of academics who serve as editors, reviewers, and authors, and that system is unsustainable. Mm-hmm. They're also saying open access regarding academic publications has turned out to be a misnomer. It goes on to say, of course, free access to research findings is good for science and society. However, open access is clearly not freely open to the scholars who are required to pay exorbitant fees to publish their results, often out of their own pockets. How do you feel about all of that?
Oh, it's bullshit. No, sorry. FCC.
No, we're on YouTube. You can swear your head off. Go ahead.
Well, it's definitely bullshit. I won't drop an F-bomb in there, but I would like to throw an F-bomb in front of it.
You can do that too. That's okay.
It's fucking bullshit.
There you go.
All right, that feels better. I'm happy now. No, that's another thing a lot of people don't understand about open access is that you're not only giving them this content, again, that you worked years on to publish, but then you have to pay for it. They want the researcher to give them oftentimes over $1,000. I've seen some as high as $2,500 to make your paper open access. And so what normally happens is that the journal will take your research, they claim ownership of it. You're not even allowed to give people, you're not allowed to distribute your work to people. You can give them a preprint version of it if they're interested in your research. But once it's a final copywritten printed article, you no longer have the ability to share your own work with people. They have to go through that journal. Most institutions have access to them. They pay large sums of money to these journals for access through different means, EBSCO, JSTOR, ISI, others. So if you want to bypass that and just give people open access, then the financial burden falls on the researchers themselves, and they have to pay money to these journals to allow other people to be able to freely access it. And in some cases, it's not entirely open. It's not entirely free. And it's another flaw in the system. I mean, I could go on for hours about not just that, but the whole process of graduate school and how TAs are treated, and union busting among TAs who demand. When I first started teaching, we're all lucky to have that position, and I'm very thankful for the opportunities I was given as a teaching assistant and research assistant, but it's barely enough to live. I think I was making $800 a month when I first started teaching classes in order to be able to buy a house when I graduated from graduate school. I was teaching 5 classes at one time at 3 different institutions. And it was barely enough to save up for a down payment on a house once I finally was able to get out of grad school and move. So there's pay discrepancies. We're the ones that do most of the teaching at large institutions in entry-level classes. Anytime it's a 101, oftentimes 200 level as well, it's going to be a graduate student teaching most of those classes. And the amount we get paid relative to those who are in tenure track positions is abysmal. Adjuncts is another problem. The way they treat grad students as children. I mean, you have people that are in their 40s and 50s who are going back to school to get degrees, and they treat them like 5-year-olds. And that's pretty ubiquitous throughout universities. There's just this sense of dominance and superiority. And I think it's another aspect of academia that's unfortunate and could definitely stand to use some change in the same capacity as the journal industry.
I'm really glad you brought that up regarding increasing pressure to publish. Well, I'm not increasing pressure, but the pressure to publish, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural want and desire for scholars who want to publish their blood, sweat, and tears. But at the same time, there is that publish or perish syndrome happening, where there are as you just mentioned so well, the exploding costs of publishing. So, Doctor, what about that issue regarding publish or perish? Do scholars go ahead and fall victim, not necessarily willingly, but do they fall victim to the increasing cost of publishing and the idiocracy behind it, or do they perish and not publish at all?
Well, there aren't really costs to publishing if you use the standard model of submitting papers to journals and peer review, and all of that works fine. They make money, we don't. The only cost would come from open access publication and the fees associated with that, which isn't a huge part of the industry yet. I think it should be. I think it's important to have other people be able to have access to research without having to go through the paywall that exists, especially in large journals like Nature and Science, where a lot of really interesting research is published. It would be great if that was more open access. Actually, some researchers just recently challenged that in anthropology. They, specifically Lee Berger at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, where I did some of my own research, and not far from where I did a couple digs over the summer. They found these new hominin remains, designated them Homo naledi, and they changed the whole model. It used to be that when we would find new hominins, the researchers would sit on them, protect them, kind of keep them as my little precious, and guard them for oftentimes a decade or 5-10 years sometimes, and then publish their results in Nature or Science, and then let people come and look at the actual bones, and then a big debate would happen, are these a new species or whatever. So these guys actually did it, not guys as in men, but men and women involved in this research. They didn't sit on them for the same period of time. They actually got a big team together and analyzed them, designated them new species, and then published in open access journals all of their results. And it went completely against what had been the way this was done in paleoanthropology for decades. And it challenged this sort of good old boy paleoanthropological model. And I see that as good. Anything disruptive that disrupts an industry that's in need of disruption, I see as a good thing. They got a lot of backlash for it, but I think that was the beginning of a building movement to start challenging this model that isn't really fair to researchers. So I'm glad to hear that there's people writing about it. There's other people challenging it. To get back to your specific question of publish or perish, that's just an aspect of this job. I don't necessarily see it as bad. It motivates us to continue doing research, and I think that's a good thing. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of writing. Scientific writing especially can be very boring, but it's also important. We need to be able to push science forward, and oftentimes the best way to motivate yourself to do that is know that you have to crank out so many papers and so much time, not just to keep your job, but to get promoted, to work your way up through a tenure track position. So yeah, publish or perish sounds horrible, and it is when you're feeling the burdens of it, but it's also, I think, somewhat healthy for the process and for our advancement of science in general.
Yes, thank you for talking about that. In the chat room, there was a collective clapping and laughing at the F-bomb. They all love that you did that, by the way.
Oh, no.
Just so you know that
Chant, you and I have to start
new fans.
swearing more. That's all there is to it.
Right.
Well, I guess you touched a nerve if you're getting me to drop F-bombs on your show, because it's not something I usually try to do.
Yeah.
But it does bother me. It irks me that,
Well, you have new
not just
fans.
that this system exists in the way it does, but there's so much complacency surrounding it that everybody just falls into place and we just march blindly forward at the beat of this journalistic drum. I think we need a challenge to this system, and
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that's outspoken about it.
Well, a little anarchy in that area can't be that bad. I wanted to bring up a question that one of our loyal listeners, who I love hearing from, just like everybody who's follows our interviews, Michael Boyle. He asks one of my favorite questions, and that is, he wants to know your thoughts on how capitalism, economics, academia, the sciences, and let's throw in there medicine too, would change post-disclosure.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. One of the biggest time travel paradoxes, I hate that word, but one of the things you see most in TV and movies is somebody coming back from the future with knowledge about that future relating to stocks, to sports teams, sports betting, things like that. And they use it for their own personal benefit. And if you really start to think about connecting different points in time and the way time works linearly with us, there's an IPO, a new stock, a company releases stock, and then that stock grows and it changes over time, or it crashes. And from the future, you can see a historical record of that. So if you had that knowledge, what are you going to do with that? And in the last two chapters of the book, I try to touch on more of those things related to the implications of intertemporal interaction. I think that's actually the name of the chapter. So yeah, what would happen? What about the medical community? Would we instantly be able to cure cancer if we figure that out in the future and there's contact between members of the future and present? And they have that information, would they share that with us? Would we be able to eradicate diseases, or would we have new diseases? Would there be disease transmission from the past to the future, or from the future to the past, in the same way that there was with previously separated groups in different parts of the world, and primarily in the Americas, where they hadn't co-evolved with these same zoonotic diseases? So yeah, it's interesting to think about our capitalistic system, medicine, just society in general, how we would view ourselves, how we would view our future if we were getting glimpses of it. Because getting glimpses into the past, we do that all the time, but what's going to happen once we start to be able to see things from the future and have an understanding of how they may play out? So I think that's a really amazing question, and certainly something that would take a while to think about. And honestly, a lot of people think about time travel in the context of physics, but there's a lot of logicians and even anthropologists that are going to need to be a part of this. And the same with the idea of extraterrestrial life. I cite a number of researchers, anthropologists in the paper who published something for NASA looking at what it might be like if we did contact extraterrestrial life. Again, I don't think it would look anything like us, but we would need to have an understanding of our own advancements and our own intellect and our own culture in order to be able to reach out to another group with their intelligence and their own culture and language. So in the same way that we have these ideas across space, I think we would also need to start thinking about those things across time more. And that brings in philosophy and anthropology and psychology and sociology into the equation. So I don't think it's just in the realm of physics and shouldn't be thought of as just an aspect of something that physicists study. I think to really understand time and the implications of cross-temporal contact, it's going to take a lot of people working in a lot of different areas of the sciences to really get at some of those deeper questions.
Doctor, I have kind of an irritating topic to bring up to you.
Okay.
You mentioned, and this is not my question, by the way. This is just oddly enough, a tiny part of it. You mentioned how you don't really like talking about proof so much in the respect that you mentioned, which I happen to agree with you on, and also how in science it's just not really, that's not something they bring up in that manner. But
yeah, sorry, I want to jump in here. There's the Sigma 5 standard.
Okay.
And the different Sigma standards. I don't know if that applies to anthropology, but I know it does in the physical sciences. Is that what you're talking about? There are different levels of proof.
Well, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. Go ahead. But thank you for bringing that up, Frank. That's going to be important, I'm sure. And that is, how about I bring up my question first? That way I don't confuse the heck out of everybody. I've come across folks where even when something is right in front of them, they'll deny it exists. Now, I can understand that. But what if, Michael, ETs land right in front of us on our front lawn, so to speak, and ETs walk outside of that ET ship, and your neighbor goes, "Nah, they're not there." But their explanation is, like, that's not proof, so to speak. You know, I'm using that term loosely. That's not proof enough for them. And they say, well, that's just a hologram that the government created, just like, by the way, Dr. Jacques Vallée did say on Thinking Aloud, Jeffrey Mishlov's show, as you know, when he said something to the effect of during the Cuban Missile Crisis, that he came across information that the U.S. government was actually creating a hologram to make it look as though Jesus Christ was going to appear when he was not now. So the neighbor sees the ETs land on everyone's front lawn. They're there with you. What kind of proof does somebody need in order to understand they are right there?
That's a pretty testable situation, though. You have that ET go up and smack them in the face and instantly prove that they are not a hologram. They feel a hand, a pentadactyl hand come slapping them across the face. They're gonna have to reconceptualize some things there pretty quick. Can we also agree that Jacques Fabrice Vallée has by far the coolest name of any ufologist? I really love his name. It's so much fun to say. Yeah. There's always going to be that. There's flat earthers, for God's sakes. And I don't care if I piss them off.
Go wash your mouth out now.
No, the Earth's not flat. There, I said it. It's pretty easy to prove that. So, no, I actually don't have a lot of patience for people that can take very simple, understandable things and just try to manipulate them to conform to their own biases. And yeah, this is one that could potentially be like that. It will take, and unfortunately we don't yet have that, handshake between a prime minister and a future human. We have a lot of pictures and videos, and people in this community know just how much is out there. There are limitations. There are certainly a number of those that are hoaxes or weather balloons or a SpaceX rocket landing. Things get mistaken for these, but even the government's admitted over countless decades that these things are real. They exist. I think the Navy just reissued some, I never read the story, I probably should have, but some new classification scheme about UFOs. So there is acknowledgement, and it's not conspiracy theory to say that. They've come out and published these documents, or at least released them, and other people have published them, showing that there have been real investigations into this for a long time, which, as I argue in the book, is sort of evidence for the reality of the situation. Why would they have these programs for so long if there wasn't something going on that needed investigating? So I think...
Yeah, and just to jump in here, my own opinion on that story that came out in the last week really sends a message. I think, well, obviously the UFO buffs like ourselves, we're obviously very excited about that. The news itself is probably a drop in the bucket, so the general public is not going to care. But the real audience for that, I think, is Navy personnel themselves.
Yeah, right.
That message is loud and clear. Hey, if you see something, if you experience something, let us know. And that
Right.
was not always the case. Yeah, I could go on ad infinitum of circumstances where that was not the case, especially regarding the Deke Slayton case. But I think it's good news. But sorry to interrupt with that.
No, I think that's important to acknowledge, and yeah, I'm sure they feel the same stigma that we do in academia, probably even worse because they're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones seeing these things much more often. But if there's not open channels to discuss it with your superiors and there's stigma surrounding it, people just won't. And I think they're robbing themselves of a lot of valuable information regarding this phenomenon by closing those communication channels. So yeah, I think that's great that is changing. The Sigma 5 thing, we use most of the quantitative research in the main areas of science use test statistics. We don't, like I said, we don't use the word proof because we have models that and statistical analyses that allow us to get a good sense of how accurate an interpretation is or how valid a model is. And we use alpha errors, p-values, just standard metrics that allow us to test ideas and to test hypotheses. And I think that's important, and it needs to be a part of this conversation. There needs to be and I think a big part of this book and the model presented in it and why it's different is because it is a testable model. It's a falsifiable explanation, a falsifiable hypothesis related to this phenomenon. And I think the more we get those sorts of things relating to what have been considered fringe sciences in the past, the more we can start to break down the stigma in science in the same way that the Navy just did with these pilots and allow for more open communication. We need to be talking about these things. There needs to be study of things we don't understand, and that's the role of scientists to do that. It's our job to find ways to investigate things using the scientific method that can help push our understanding forward. That's how it's always been. Unfortunately, a lot of times things are ridiculed at first, and oftentimes violently opposed. And then after a period of time, if someone was right about something, it's just everybody jumps on board as if it was self-evident the whole time. It was just an obvious thing. But they disregard the struggle that was involved in getting this knowledge out there. So I think it's unfortunate, and hopefully this book and the conservative approach to investigating this phenomenon and the rigorous scientific approach can hopefully open some channels to future research and hopefully ones that aren't victimized by the stigma that's been long associated with it.
Doctor, I wonder how closely ETs would follow the model you just spoke of and Frank brought up regarding science, if it would be outdated, again, according to the probability and possibility that ETs are millions of years ahead of us technology-wise. I wonder what kind of scientific model they use.
I mean, the scientific method itself is somewhat timeless. It's a very basic structure for investigating things and a rigorous method with which to do so. So I would imagine that it's probably the same, just they have a much longer period of time in which they could use it to understand things in a way that we can't from our current position in time. But I would guess that the same process of constructing hypotheses, testable, falsifiable, repeatable hypotheses, and then going through the methods of collecting data and testing through statistical means or whatever means. I think that'll probably be the same into the future as well.
I wanted to bring up a topic that's near and dear to experiencers, abductees, and contactees. And I'm going to ask you the same question, but it's under the umbrella of that. And that is, and I'll be very fast on this because I think it's probably time to wrap up the show. And that is, abductees, experiencers, and contactees have reported seeing ETs, but then some have reported that their mind could not wrap itself around the fact that they were seeing an ET, or the evidence, the fact or the evidence that they were seeing one. So I wanted to know, if a person sees an ET and they're having a hard time grappling with realizing they're in the presence of one, how do you feel the human mind deals with that? Because some of these folks are scarred for life and they're having a difficulty regarding that challenge.
Absolutely. I mean, anything that's that far removed from our conventional sense of reality is going to be extremely difficult to process. And, the whole phenomenon itself, it's like, imagine showing a cell phone to a Denisovan or a Neanderthal some 50,000 years ago and then asking them to explain what that is. It's much more than a phone these days. It's a little handheld computer, video camera, etc. But there's no way to really conceptualize something that exists so far out from your point in time, whether you're going back or forward. And then, seeing these beings and not understanding who they are or what they are can be a life-altering thing. It can be very traumatic for people. And another big part of writing this book was to try to offer some sort of understanding for people who have had these experiences, and to hopefully frame it in a context that's more understandable, and offer some explanation of not just who they are, but possibly why they were doing those things to them. And hopefully there's some comfort in that for people who have had that experience, because a lot of the scary aspects of it are probably just not understanding who this is and why they're doing these things. And if they were to read the book and see the evidence put forth that they're really just us, I think that would take a lot of the fear out of it, that they're still humans operating within seemingly some aspects of the guidelines that we've set forth with regard to research ethics. There are reports and cases that seem to go outside of that, but for the most part, it seems to be a pretty non-invasive sort of research where they're not trying to scar people for life. That is the outcome for most people, because there's just so much uncertainty around it and fear associated with being drug out of bed in the middle of the night and these big-eyed creatures standing over you doing weird things to you. But I don't know. I think that's a personal struggle for a lot of people that can hopefully be made somewhat better by having a more general understanding of what that encounter actually was and why it may have happened to them.
I wanted to wrap up the show, but before I do, wanted to ask Frank if he had any last questions.
Well, basically, we want to plug the book, of course. Is it available now, Doctor?
It is, yeah. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo. There's also an audio book that's available on Audible and iTunes. It's starting to get into some independent bookstores, but for now it's mostly just available online.
Did you read it? Did you do the reading?
I did. Yeah, it was a nightmarish process. I mean, I'm kind of fortunate. I've been in a band for 5 years, and we recorded an album a few years ago, and a lot of that we did ourselves with good equipment and software. So I have some audio recording and engineering skills, but just the process of reading something every day for what took 4 months. I probably read the whole book 5 times, to be honest, because just little pops and clicks that you hear in a good microphone, people knocking on the door at random times. And you
didn't get it done in one take, basically.
No, but it's been really well received. It's been a very popular version of this book. And I think people enjoy it too, because there are, I try to explain everything, even very complex scientific things, to be understandable to anyone. But there's still some big words in there. And I think people have enjoyed the audiobook too, because those are said for them. They don't have to kind of stumble through the pronunciation of a word like synapomorphy. It's just said and then explained. So it's been pretty popular for that and other reasons. But no, it was a lot of fun too. I shouldn't just trash the whole process. It was fun to do. It was just much more time consuming than I ever thought it would be.
Well, I think that...
Chad, I want to give the title of the book. Of course, it is
Yes, I was just going to say that.
Identified flying objects. Hang on a sec here. I'm reading it's a long title. A multidisciplinary scientific approach to the UFO phenomenon.
Thank you.
So, Doctor, I appreciate you coming back on again.
Oh, it's been great. I love talking to you guys.
That book, by the way, and by the way, I just want to make a comment about your audiobook. You should always, anytime you do an audiobook, Doctor, mention Jacques Fabrice Vallée, just to say it. But anyway,
it's fun. I used his full name in the book too. I may have even added a subtle French accent to it because it was fun for me.
That's wonderful. Wanted to say that your book came out Friday, April 22nd. You had a book signing at Slancha Butte, Slancha, which is what is that, like a cafe or a book place in Butte, Montana, correct?
No, it's a pub.
It's a pub. Oh, okay.
It's a poorhouse. They've got lots of different beers from all over Montana.
Yes.
And it's a great place.
Beer and UFOs go together.
They do very well. Very well.
Wanted to also mention the website you have, which is IDFLYOBJ. So that's IDFLYOBJ.com. I did put that in the chat room area, and I will also put it in the thread underneath the interview. And Doctor, also, I'm glad you mentioned that you're a musician. You're also a painter. I did look at your art. It's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Really appreciate your art. And I do want to recommend everybody, please go to his website. Please read his book, Identified Flying Objects, a Multidisciplinary Approach to the UFO Phenomenon. And thank you very much for having been on our show today. You've been very generous with your time.
Thanks again, Dr. Masters.
I always enjoy talking to you guys. I enjoy the show, and it's been great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye-bye now. Have a good day.
You too.
And Chant, another successful show in the books. And we've got quite a month of May coming up. Got Alejandra Rojas on Monday.
Yes.
We've got a little project. We've also got, at some point this month, we don't have an exact date narrowed down quite yet, our long-awaited OVNI Super Show, where we'll have maybe a handful of South American researchers talking about the UFO phenomenon down in South America. And we've also got Andrew Radzowitz coming up. Raz, my old pal, he's relocated down to Australia, and he's working with I can't. I don't think I can say. I forget what he told me I can talk about and what he can't talk about. But
right.
He's working down there, and it's going to be fun talking to him. I haven't talked to him since he moved. He was still in New York the last time I talked to him directly.
Yeah, I
be a
love
lot
his
of fun.
East Coast accent, by the way.
Yeah, I was shocked.
It's interesting listening to him talk with that East Coast accent while he's in Australia. Because you and I watched a video together of him with a gentleman from Australia. It's just interesting listening to both of them talk at the same time. The other person we have who's going to be absolutely fascinating is Calvin Parker.
Yep.
And then we have a UFO mega panel special it's a star-studded event that will be happening either next month or the month thereafter. Big names in ufology regarding the topic of females in ufology. A very little known, little talked about topic. And when I say little known, it's really literally not talked about hardly at all. But I did want to mention there's 300 to 400 females I've been able to identify and create and compile a list of who are actively doing hard work and research in the topic of ufology. We'll be talking about that and more during that show.
Yep, we'll have that, and I will just kick back and drink beer and watch the game while you and the females talk about the UFO stuff, But we've got that. We've also got that's not all. We've got a big month planned, and I think this is the key. And I'm going to get to another show that we're going to do that I think might be near and dear to your heart, Chant Hannah. But we're also going to do. I'm working with someone on a little bit of a remote viewing show where we might be doing some live. Well, we will be doing. I don't know if we'll talk about. I think we'll probably talk about the protocols. That might be a little bit of a hint as to who this individual is. We'll be talking a little bit about the protocols and how we can set this up and do this live, so nobody should question the efficacy or the honesty of the demonstrations. And we'll do that. So that could be 2 shows, but it will certainly be at least one. That's going to be a lot of fun. And Chant, I think we're going to have no choice, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Not too long. I guess it's been, what, a month ago, maybe a little bit longer now. We had Chase Klutsky on our show.
Yes,
and
we did.
Chase has, unfortunately for her, attracted some haters. And the fact that we just had Chase on and did an interview attracted some haters as well. And the most upfront about it, the loudest about it, is someone named Erica Lukes. And frankly, we are going to deconstruct this toxic individual. In my view, the most toxic individual in all of ufology. And we will. It's not what I started the show to do, to mire in the sewer. But as she has apparently dug deep into Google and found my old mugshot from 13 years ago, where I was actually charged with assault, something that was thrown out at the preliminary hearing level, I might add, because it became evident at the preliminary hearing level that all I was doing was defending myself. But I'm going to defend myself now. I'm going to defend my show. I know, Chant, you're more than capable of doing it. I'm sure you're going to jump in and do some of that yourself and defend our work. Obviously, the proof is in the pudding. Where's your work? What are you doing? That's really the key. And you can rest assured that we will deconstruct, as I said, this particular toxic individual. I'm furious about her behavior. I think she has a narcissistic personality disorder and is seriously deranged. And we will go through all that. We will go through the different personality disorders and examples from her past behavior in terms of how she fits this profile and her work, such as it is, and the work of some of her allies who are frankly dishonest, disreputable, lying people, in particular Ben Moss. And we're just going to have at it. We're just going to basically take as much time as we need to take basically take her apart. She's got a long track record of attacking people and being very, very slimy in this field. And she chose to take us on, and she stepped out of her weight class, basically. I'm going to fuck that bitch up, okay? I'm going to get on this show, and I'm going to take her apart. Because I did her show. Well, we'll get into it all.
And you mean that metaphorically when you say that?
Yes, yeah, metaphorically,
right.
Of course, metaphorically,
and,
of course.
just want to make that clear. Wanted to say something that I thought was really odd, and that is, here we are working so hard regarding the topic of ufology and research into other phenomena, and you find this mugshot on yourself. Like here we are, just UFO buffs. And she's posting your mugshot. Like, what does that have to do with ufology?
Well,
it has nothing to
I'm
look
kind
at
of surprised nobody found it sooner, to be honest. But, again, it is kind of interesting. It was an experience that was kind of interesting because it was basically an altercation between me and a friend of a friend. So nothing altercation. Nobody got hurt. It was basically nothing. But this guy didn't like the result, and he went to the cops, and I got arrested. It can happen to anybody. Somebody goes and files a report, and it can happen. It can happen to a lot of people. And it happened to me. Ultimately, the system worked. Like I said, the case was thrown out at the preliminary hearing level, but it was a very instructive experience because there was something so wrong with this guy and so toxic with this guy. I Googled, what I thought was wrong with him. It was very interesting because what I got a lot of results was a psychopath. And I started seriously investigating malignant personality disorders, psychopaths, sociopaths, and so on. And the lesser of that group would be someone with a narcissistic personality disorder. There's no question in my mind Luke's has it. And, I'm not going to put up with this shit. I'm just not going to do it. The gloves are off. I've already, actually, even before this recent thing happened, I approached Dave Scott and asked him, as a neutral host, to have me and her on. I'm sick of her shit. There's no question about it. And the gloves are off. And we're just going to take this. We're just going to take this loss apart. I'm sick of her. And
Well,
we'll do this. I don't know. Maybe next Sunday we'll do it.
well, and I just wanted to mention something I've had to deal with regarding her dividing the UFO community yet again, which she is known for doing
It goes back to
on a
her trying to run
notorious
Isaac
level.
Coy
Yeah,
out of the business, a
right.
respected researcher who happens to want to work under a pseudonym because of his day job. I mean, that's his business. If somebody works under a pseudonym, what you do is you judge the bottom line. Somebody's going to have to go back and dig pretty deep. Guess what? They won't find it where I'm involved in trying to run somebody out of the business or trying to attack somebody or anything along those lines. There's been the occasional, spirited back and forth, especially going back to the Socorro case. There was a lot of that back in those days. But that's part of the game. But this woman is a cheap shot artist. She is a scumbag. She is a blight on ufology, and we're going to go through all of it. Her long track record of doing this kind of garbage and just attacking people for no reason. And believe me, the fire is going to go both ways. Believe me. She wants to. Guess what? That's about the worst thing that she's going to be able to find about me. There's no criminal record there. Nothing like that. No. Let me finish. Let me finish. There's no criminal record there. My criminal record is clean. Yeah, there's that arrest. Okay. And there was a DUI back in the 80s too. So there's that. So
nobody cares about DUIs. DUIs have nothing to do with the topic of ufology. I just there's a group out there, I won't mention their name at all, will not mention names regarding the group or the folks involved, but they have all the DUIs of a certain person who's iconic in the realm of ufology. In this group, they have kept the post up. I have no idea why they've done that, but I just wanted to mention something to you, Frank, and that is, I've had to deal with character assassination posts recently by Erica, which I heard through the grapevine was taken down.
Attempts at it, because they didn't assassinate your character. Your character is still strong, just as mine is.
Right. Well, exactly. That's a great separation regarding what I just said. But this post that she did, what she did was she posted some material on me that was fake. And what I mean by fake is a person who is absolutely out of their mind, who has 24 different profiles on Facebook and absolutely knows nothing about me, made up a spew of lies due to jealousy. And then after she posted this under an article somewhere, I don't know where it was, it's, social media, it's hard to keep up with sometimes, in the mountains of material out there. And somebody found this obscure comment that she made, this crazy person made, and then Erica reposted this mentally deranged person's lies and false story about me on her page. And what I did was I went to the place that actually had the post up, let the folks know related to this post about the legal issues regarding it, and the person involved took it down immediately.
Yeah.
Because, again, of the legal implications of the slander and the libel behind it. So then I went ahead and went to Erica's page, and I wrote there that these lies, spreading them, not only are not fair, but what is the point of spreading lies about a person in ufology? It just tells me there's a huge personal issue with Erica that has
Well, yeah, she has a narcissistic personality disorder. There's no question about that in my mind.
And I have never done slanderous posts on her. I want to make that clear. We've never done that. The only thing I've ever done with regards to her is on that show with Chase Kletsky. I made it clear that I felt that Erica going out of her way after Chase had spent years as second in command with MUFON, the first thing Erica did as soon as she got wind that Chase was stepping down, not resigning from MUFON, by the way, but stepping down from her second in command post at MUFON, because she's still at MUFON, she went and wrote an article, and I say that in air quotes because it was not really an article. It was like a 2-year-old wrote it. She said that Chase had stepped down due to misconduct, allegations of misconduct in MUFON, which was a lie, And it turned out Chase has stepped down voluntarily because she's doing something on behalf of the UFO community, which only two people are known to do, and that is herself and Steve Bassett, regarding lobbying in Washington on behalf of the UFO community. My point to her was, if you're going to write an article and call it one, why not check your sources? It's just called Journalism 101, and it's also moral and ethical behavior regarding publishing anything about anybody online. I think it's terrible that Chase is going through lung cancer and spent all of her blood, sweat, tears, and own money after a couple decades or more at MUFON to step down at her post voluntarily as second in command, only to have that article by Erica written as like the period at the end of the sentence for all of Chase's fine work at MUFON. That's not only undeserving and unfair, it's reprehensible that Erica would do something like that. That's not true journalism. That is social depravity.
No, she's sick. There's something wrong with her, and we will get down to it. We'll also deconstruct some of her dishonest colleagues like Ray Stanford, Ben Moss. I don't know of any dishonesty in Scott Brown, but this guy seems to have a very high opinion of himself. But if you look at his website, you'll see his investigation into his brother's lawn, which has some unusual grass growth. I mean, it's hysterically nothing stuff. You want to look at my website? You can see my website. If you'll see that in the scroll bar, in the bottom third down here at the page, ufopartisan.blogspot.com, the kind of research that I did when I first started in this field, finding a documented meeting in the White House regarding the 1952 DC UFO case. Nobody found that before. Solving the Socorro case. Other articles in there that I think you'll all find quite interesting. You've got Chant's website, chanthannah.wordpress.com, where she's got those interviews and links to the interviews here. Of course, you can find those right on YouTube. But there's a lot of great text interviews that you did before we started hosting the show together. So there's that. You've got me running a group with more than 70,000 members at Facebook, where we've got as good a UFO news feed as you will find anywhere. Okay, judge the work. Okay, you want to question my integrity, Erica Lukes? Yeah, judge the work. It's the work, not something that happened 13 years ago. Yeah, it is a fact that I did get arrested, but not guilty. In fact, it didn't even get to the point of being guilty or not guilty. Case was thrown out. It was that weak. And you know what else? You're weak too. You better get ready. You better batten down your hatches, because you pissed me the fuck off.
That's understandable. It's not just you either. I've had people come to me privately, very upset regarding what they felt was a huge personal issue Erica had decided she had with somebody for whatever petty reason that had really nothing to do with them, but everything to do with her. And I think it's time that people call her out on her BS, because what's going on is she's actually creating such a divide in the UFO community. She's actually using Scott Brown's In the Field group to serve as her platform of basically a soapbox to air out all her petty issues.
And Scott,
regarding
let me jump in here. Scott Brown is a gutless puke. Okay, I found out about those kind of posts and what was going on over there, and I asked to enter the group. Okay, and I knew he wouldn't do it. I knew he wouldn't let me in. But because that's how these people are. She was constantly wanting, Chase doesn't address these questions we have. Chase doesn't, when dealing with Klutsky. Well, now she's dealing with us. We're more than happy to address these questions, but here we are getting blocked. Here we are not allowed in, not allowed to defend ourselves where they're slandering us, okay? Well, the gloves are off now. The gloves are off.
So, just wanted to mention this since we're talking about it, because it's kind of important to mention. If people go into In the Field group by Scott Brown, which is touted as a group that looks for evidence, and I'm not quite sure what else.
Evidence of his brother's lawn growing.
Right.
abnormally.
And he also has,
really hot stuff. And some lady, it seems like some nice lady sent him a photograph, something she didn't notice, and then she saw some kind of object in the sky, and it's like, and she seems like a nice lady. I'm not going to trash her. She sent it to the guy, but I mean, that's his research. That's his research.
There is a post that he created that everybody reposts I say everybody, let me restate that. Some people in the UFO community that own FB groups, Facebook groups, will repost his poster that's basically in the field hoaxes and debunking folks. The thing is that list, who do we know who determined who was to be debunked?
I've seen that.
And so I know folks in the UFO community that will refuse to post that poster he made because they don't know who actually decided who was a hoax or who was to be debunked. So that's an issue. The other issue is there's a lady and this is connected to what I'm talking about regarding Scott Brown and his group. There's a lady by the name of Melissa Kennedy. She went into my Global Female Researchers group. You were there, Frank. You saw her. You were with me when she came in.
I blew her off, but
I know she tried to actually create a fake event, which I actually, with screenshots, and I can use the word proof here verifiably and authentically, proved that she was trying to set up myself and this group. By the way, she's friends with Erica and Scott Brown, so you'll see where I'm going with this.
Of course.
To state she was basically saying she was kicked out of the Global Female Researchers group while she was sitting in the group stating in a post in the Global Female Researchers group saying, hey, I've been kicked out of the group. Why did you do that? Basically is what she was saying. Yeah. And I said, okay, you're saying you've been kicked out of the group. You're sitting right there while you're in the group. If you want to get kicked out that bad, I'll just block you. I did that. Then she ran to Scott Brown's group and said, the Global Female Researchers group, that I and that group were a sham because she got kicked out. So then I see screenshots from friends who are in Scott Brown's group on my behalf and other people's behalf because they're tired of the character assassinations, giving me screenshots saying, basically Scott Brown is using his group to allow Melissa Kennedy and Erica Lukes and Ted Rowe and others who act toxic in the UFO community to make all kinds of character assassination related comments about us that are based on pure lies. So my point is this. Scott Brown, who states he is into evidence and debunking of hoaxes, why is he so reliant upon people's fake stories about people like us who are working our asses off in the realm of ufology and other phenomena and claiming that he's in evidence while doing the exact opposite? Well,
there are some bad sites on that list. I mean, basically, for the most part, I try to focus on the positive. And I don't even, like in my group, Secure Team 10, third phase of the moon.
But the thing
let me finish. Let me
I don't
finish.
need a poster from Scott Brown to know Secure Team 10 is the way they are.
Yep. So I want to go ahead and basically I knew Scott wouldn't have the guts to allow me into the group and defend myself and his group or defend our show or defend you from his slanders. So basically you have to after it became clear after a couple attempts to be allowed into the group, and I told someone that I got these individual screenshots from that. I knew he wasn't going to do it, but basically, and I'll read my final request. Thanks for not letting me in, you pussy. I knew you wouldn't. I never bow to anybody who didn't start up with me, my co-host, or my show first. When you get it back, you run and hide like the fucking cowards you are. I stand by that statement. I'm putting it out there myself. I'm putting it out there publicly. He posted it there, and he's got a lot of supporters and talking about me being thin-skinned and all that. But you know what? I'm not thin-skinned. my skin is pretty thick. We've had some of these discussions before where, you're telling me, yeah, hey, your skin's pretty thick. It's thicker than mine and so on and so forth. But after a while, enough is enough. I'm sick of this shit. And we're just going to go through it in detail. In excruciating detail. Probably, I don't know, you want to do this next Sunday? Because like I say, we got Alejandro.
That's fine, and that won't be difficult for me to do. And by the way, regarding thick skin, just want to let everybody know, I have been a group owner of many UFO groups on Facebook, and also the admin of up to 20 different groups on Facebook, some at 100,000 or more member levels, some below that. And, you have to have a thick skin because as an admin in those groups and a group owner, you come across people of all different kinds of backgrounds, very toxic a lot of times. And also just in life in general. One thing I wanted to mention is, there's just a point where when somebody's posting a mugshot, though, I mean, it's just like
I don't care about that. I don't care about that, really. It was, the system worked. The case was thrown out.
I understand that. But
it's like the principle of the thing. She thinks she's really hurting me. She's not.
But my point is this. I understand that, and I know you're right. And I'm not saying that it affected you in the manner in which I'm speaking. But I am calling her out for using low life tactics to spread a fake profile of you that is absolutely unequivocally not true. Now, back to my point about being thick-skinned. She can go all day making up lies and stories about us, but at the end of the day, I think the person with the thinnest skin is her. Because
it is, absolutely. Absolutely.
She's dedicating her life and time to spreading this kind of toxic material about people who are actually looking up in the sky and covering topics like you and I in general. That sounds like a huge personal issue she has that she's, and I can't help her with that. There's nothing I can do to help her with that. Like, I don't even have any empathy with her regarding that. What she's trying to do is ruin people's lives out for what?
Well, she's trying, but again, the bottom line is the work. I mean, my life could be a complete catastrophe. It's not, I'm pretty happy with it. But as far as the UFO stuff goes, this is great. This is great stuff. And I don't even have a problem with this because I kind of relish it. I miss my old hockey playing days because I used to play against guys like this, once in a while now and again. You get these cheap shot artists and, once in a while you would get tired of it and you would give it back. And they'd be the ones who would cry the loudest. This is old school for me. This is old hat for me. Defending myself. No worries there. But let me run through a list of narcissistic personality disorder traits, and they basically all apply to her. Insults are targeted very often, then lie when confronted about it. When confronted with their behavior, they pretend to be innocent and play the victim. Oh, that's absolutely her. She started all this shit. I didn't, I couldn't give two fucks about her, to be honest with you, until now. But again, she went over the line, and that was her mistake. So everything is always somebody else's fault, even when it's obviously not. They always have a justification for every bad thing they do. They think they're always right. Very controlling to tell you how to live. Very hypocritical. Absolutely. She was running around when Chase was ignoring her during her insult period. Why didn't she answer these questions? Why didn't she answer these questions? She's not doing that now. She's blocking people who are ready to come over and answer those questions. Very hypocritical. We're an open book here. No worries. They accuse you of doing to them what they do to you. It's called projection. Absolutely. Portraying themselves as angels outside when they're actually demons with their targets. Subtly lead a smear campaign. Well, I don't know how much subtlety there is about it anymore. The cat's out of the bag. It's all out now, so it's no big deal against their target. So they isolate it, make sure they don't get help. Well, they're going to try, but we've got our share. I'm much happier with the people who and would side with the people who we've worked with and we've talked with and we've dealt with than the liars and frauds like Ben Moss and Ray Stanford that she's been dealing dealing with for years and years. They pretend to be victims. They blame their target for their own behavior. They are incredibly arrogant and sadistic. They see the target as weak and deserving to suffer. Well, guess what? We're not weak, and we're not suffering. I think I think the fact that she posted my mugshot is hilarious, really, and they think they are models to be followed. So, like I said, we're going to deconstruct anything. Again, I did her show a year ago. I went on there to debate the Socorro case with the liar Ben Moss, and it was a hilarious victory. Basically 2-on-1. Very unprofessional from Erica. She was not at all an impartial moderator. She basically took Moss aside the whole time and still got her ass kicked and melted down at the end of the show. Moss, too. Moss didn't melt down, but Erica did at the end of the show, and made a fool of herself, basically. She still left it up. I don't know if I'll read the transcript from that show or play the actual tape. I'll probably read the transcript because I don't want to run into any copyright issues. But I'll definitely be able to get hold of the rights to run some of Moss's presentations where he openly lies about the Socorro case. No worries there. Brown is kind of a non-entity. He doesn't really have anything, but he's got his list of CGI YouTube websites and his brother's lawn. So he's got that going for him. But he's obviously over in that department. And we'll see. We'll see who else crawls out from under a rock to defend this toxic, narcissistic, personality disordered individual as we go forward. So there we go.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. And thank you also for mentioning the social media hate campaigns that Scott Brown, Melissa Kennedy, Erica Lukes, that we had this opportunity to mention to the UFO community, that folks like this are actually perpetrating upon us. Again, I'm not asking to answer this necessarily, but for what? To what end?
Because we interviewed Chase Klutsky, and
know,
frankly, going in, I really didn't know that she had an issue with Lukes and Moss, to tell you the truth. But when she mentioned those names, I go, oh yeah, okay. And I don't even remember how much detail we went into it. But that's where all this started. This all started from that because we interviewed Chase Klutsky. That was the beginning of this, and that's where
I meant
the
it
nonsense
in a more
started.
empirical, like a more macro manner, like philosophically, to what end? It's not proving anything. Let's just say I have DUIs, hypothetically. So what? What is that going to do for anybody in the ufology community? Nothing. I know a lot of people in the UFO community that have DUIs, traffic citations.
President George Bush was elected president after it became public. He had been busted for a DUI, and Dick Cheney was busted for 2 of them.
And like you said, it's easy to be in a position where, let me put it this way, not necessarily easy. Let me just restate that. Anyone can be in a position to suddenly find themselves being arrested for whatever reason. You can take that as you wish. And I'm just saying that in the most general way possible, that there are situations that could occur. Now, does it mean you're guilty? No. Will you get a mugshot out of that? Yes, they give that to you for free. So
yeah, and the sites that post those are basically a form of extortion because you can spend money and get them removed. I could have done that. I don't care about it. It's like, so what? It's out there. It's never hurt me in any way. I don't like the fact that it's out there, but it's out there. So, what are you going to do? And again, I was kind of surprised nobody found it sooner, but, what are you going to do? But it doesn't upset me. It just indicates the kind of low-class scum that Erica Lukes really is.
Yeah, and also want to mention to folks, and I know, Frank, that this is not necessarily anything you're concerned about, but I wanted to mention that social media hate campaigns like the one that Erica, Scott Brown, and others in the UFO community are currently active in, instead of ufology, the actual topic that they claim to be so immersed in, can actually get to the point where they're illegal. It's illegal activity because bullying, harassment, and getting folks involved in social threats under the name of ufology can earn that person time, like real hardcore time, or charges against them. Now, like I said, I'm not saying you're concerned about that. But I'm bringing that up as a topic. I think that social media hate campaigns can be very dangerous, and we've seen the likes of those before, and the kinds of things that can occur to people in the end. So that's not good. I just wanted to say that I think that's something that everybody should be very wary of when they come across posts like what Erica did to me, what Erica did to you, things like that.
Yeah, well, we'll try to do it. But I don't consider what they're doing bullying. They're using the material that they've got to try to attack us. But I don't feel it's bullying. I don't feel that they will claim that our response is bullying, but it's not. It's just payback. And you know what they say about payback? It is a bitch. So get ready for it. It's coming.
Fair enough. I appreciate your bringing.
I got a whole week to dig deeper. I mean, off the top of my head, we talked a lot about it, but we'll go through it. We'll back up everything we're saying. We've got our evidence.
Well,
so I'm not worried about it.
I think her feeling that she was provoked by my bringing up that she needed to actually check her sources for an article, like contact Chase Klutsky to see, hey, Chase, why did you step down from the second in command position of MUFON? And also, let's make it clear, she did not resign from MUFON either. She's still there after, I think, 22 years or more of being involved with MUFON. When a person writes something, it's out there, it's online, it's basically forever. So even if you delete it, somebody else has that information, even if it's bots out there gathering the information. Wanted to say that as soon as I said that on the program, for some reason, I guess that got under her skin. And I can tell you this, people make mistakes in journalism. Sometimes they might forget to give somebody credit for an article. That is not something to hang somebody over. But when you're trying to say that someone's entire career is based on allegations of misconduct, that's just not fair to that person that has spent a couple decades or more of their heart, sweat and blood type of effort to say something like that. It's just, it's not only unforgivable, it's unnecessary.
We'll be ready to go. That's all I can say. So next Sunday we'll do that?
Yes, I look forward to it.
Yeah, that'll give us enough time to put all our ducks in a row and really break down the, frankly, low character, low integrity, dishonesty that has been going on with those folks. Again, I asked Dave Scott if he would moderate a debate. This goes back a ways, so I was already starting to get a little bit steamed about this a while back. But now that the gloves are off, the gloves are off. The gloves are off. So
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
So there we go. All right. So Wednesday night, Alejandro Rojas, and then Sunday night we will, next Sunday we will be back, and we will do this thing. We will do it. Go into detail and again back up everything that we're saying with documentation, just like we do everything else we do. So
right.
We're good to go.
And I want to make it clear that when you said that you were going to, tear her apart or go after her, that you meant that in a metaphorical manner only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She lives in Utah. I'm not going to drive out. What am I going to do? Drive out to Utah and bang on her door? And
by the way, regarding driving, I did want to mention I am tired of hearing her talk about how she spent $1,200 to put in her vehicle to go to another state to pick up some UFO related stuff that was promised to her that she did not get, when it turns out her car needed that kind of money put into it to work anyway.
Yeah. And there's that. And it's like, if you wanted the stuff so bad, why don't you just rent a car?
I know, right?
Rent a car. How complicated is that? Look, I freely admit I drive a piece of crap. I live 2 miles from my office. It makes no economic sense to have a $30,000 car and making payments on it. It makes no sense at all to do that.
Well,
none whatsoever. So, if for whatever reason I ever needed to drive any great long distance, and it doesn't come up that much, but if I did, I rent a car.
Well,
for the day, it's like what, $50?
If somebody had to put $1,200 into their vehicle to go out of state to pick up some UFO related stuff, whether they get it or not, what does that tell you about their car? It's not about ufology. It's about the car. Okay.
Yeah,
It's just so
$1,200 went into the
funny.
car, so you got $1,200 worth of repairs.
But she made a post dedicated to how
Oh, I know.
the international director of MUFON somehow was to blame for I'm not sure what, but it was basically a $1,200 put money into car post slash blaming the director of MUFON, international director of MUFON, for her not getting those documents
I know.
when it had nothing to do with, like literally 0% to do with him. It had to do with the individual that made the claim they were going to give her these supposed these documents, and it turns out they just made an about face and changed their mind. Who knows? It could be because they didn't like how she treats people in the UFO community. It could be connected to that. We just don't know. But the thing is they change their mind. But she ran it. Of course, her MO is to blame everybody instead of owning up to her own issues and saying, hey, my car needed the money. Hey, that person decided to change their mind. They have the free will to do so. Nope, I'm going to blame the international director of MUFON for that. How she made that connection is laughable.
I know. Well, we're going to. I think we've already spent the better part of 45 minutes talking about this. We really, like I said, we want to have our ducks in a row. We want to have our evidence. We want to go back and forensically go through the. There have been a lot of articles about her over the years and her toxic behavior. So we're going to go through all those. We're going to go through my experience being on her show with either. I'll have to make up my mind. I'm not sure. I don't want to run into any copyright issues, but I can at least get hold of transcripts of the show itself when I did her show. And she had her epic meltdown like a 5-year-old child at the end of the show, because basically I whipped them both in terms of that debate. And I mean, we'll have it together. We'll be ready to go. We're always ready to go. We'll be ready to go.
Right, and so I'm just really glad we were able to give a little bit of insight regarding what we're going to talk about that Sunday. I just think it's really important that you brought it up, because the UFO community needs to finally understand, why are they seeing these posts on us that are so negative. And I'm just glad that I'm able to address the fact that the information that Erica reposted on me, which ended up becoming an empty post because folks involved with allowing the post had to take it down immediately.
Yeah.
And not only because they agreed with me that the veracity of what that crazy person posted about me was absolutely off the map, but then because it's just not fair to do that to a person, anybody, regarding stating terrible things about them that are not true, and then putting their entire reputation at risk, and not having any, what do you call it? I guess basically it's just a situation where people are saying whatever they want and posting it wherever they want. Erica took up that post, reposted it, and it's an empty post now. My understanding through the grapevine is she had to take that post down, or she did take that post down.
Yeah, she took it down. Down.
Okay, well, and there's a reason for that, because of the legal implications of that original post, and that is there was nothing true in what that crazy person said about me.
There you go.
It's just so reckless what's going on. It just...
Well, actually, there is a lot of latitude. Technically, we're all limited public figures in terms of this UFO stuff. So,
yes, extremely limited. It's not like I'm Oprah here. I'm not at that level. I'm just basically, I just want to say this. I am just a person who is a UFO buff, who loves to cover the topic of ufology and other phenomena. Now, if you want to post mugshots and fake articles about us, I don't find that acceptable. But if you're going to do it, just know I will absolutely defend myself. And I'll be more than happy to talk to Erica anytime, anywhere.
There you go. She won't do it. Just like Scott Brown won't do it. And just
Right.
like, Moss doesn't want to have another go at me and about the Socorro case. Because frankly, when I was on that show, I took it pretty easy with him. I knew from video presentations he's done at various conferences and whatnot how he lies about the case, exaggerated what Officer Zamora said that he saw. Just lies, there's no other way of putting it. He's an absolute liar. But you learn from Ray Stanford. So what are you going to do? The channeling UFO detecting peddling Ray Stanford, another real winner. But I guess he's older now. He'll probably sit on the sidelines. I've challenged him to debates a bunch of times. He won't do it, and I'm not concerned about that. But I'm ready to go for next week. We might have given too much away, but like I said, we'll have a little bit more time. We'll be able to back up everything that we've got to say. Trust me on that. You can trust me on that. When it comes to research into UFOs, we both do a nice job. And now our research is going to be changed in a different direction, at least for the next week. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun because, I relish a good fight. I do. It's been a long time since I played hockey and, was knocking people around on the ice. So we'll do it metaphorically here next week, and I'm ready to go.
We will.
All right. Anything else?
One thing I wanted to mention before you just sign off, which take me 30 seconds to say, that mentally deranged person who did some crazy article or post on me, I wanted to give a little bit of background on that person.
Yeah, I've actually, hang on a sec. Let me, she was like trying to raise money somehow or something.
Yeah.
Let me,
I can actually talk about that without.
I can show it. I've got it.
Okay.
I've got the image.
It's like a pink looking post or something.
I know. I got it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I am real and need to know your. I'll post it.
Okay. Yeah. I'll just start talking about it. And that is this person who has 24 different profiles and an ungodly amount of pages regarding to her association, which is weird to me. Like this association, if you knew the history of it anyway. What this person did, and by the way, this is not Erica I'm talking about. This is a person where this started.
This is Erica's source on her attempt to smear you.
Yeah, this is her source. What it was about is, again, not Erica, but a different person. This mentally deranged individual did a post basically demanding folks for money monthly in the UFO community. And I did a double take when I saw it, and I really had a lot of concern about it because let's be clear here. The UFO community doesn't just encompass kids to adults. It also encompasses elderly people that are very old and are dealing with Alzheimer's and issues that are very difficult to grapple with. So when a person like this individual has 24 different profiles, demands money from people monthly, on a regular, with no end in sight regarding the termination of when that person needs to stop giving them money monthly, that can actually cause people who are vulnerable in the UFO community to give away their income to a person like this. And I found that absolutely unacceptable. So what I did was I went to this individual and I asked her about it. And I also asked her director, why are you asking for money monthly? The answer was nonsensical. The answer from that individual with 24 different profiles was, and her name is TJ Morris, Teresa Thurmond Morris. She did a post stating that she was helping humanoid sentient beings be elevated out of poverty. Okay? Now, that not only does not make sense, but she was also saying that she was going to help educate them. Well, she didn't explain how either. So now, can you see why that kind of answer is not acceptable regarding demanding money monthly from folks? That she's basically going to funnel any funds that she gets to humanoid sentient beings that need to be educated by her and then lifted and elevated up to whatever level. I'm not sure, maybe to be abducted. I don't know. But I talked to her director and I actually demanded from him answers as to why they needed money monthly. And he told me that it was for patches, insignias, and flags for their uniforms, because they have uniforms that he and TJ Morris plan to wear at UFO conventions. We're talking about Ken Johnson, the civilian astronaut, is her director, or was at that time anyway, of her ACO organization. When I called them out on that, she started going all over social media, making all kinds of crazy posts on me, saying all kinds of lies. And one of her own administrators of her UFO group came to my aid and my defense, and actually told TJ that what she was saying was incorrect. And what TJ did was she sidestepped it. She didn't address it. And she continued her social media hate campaign against me to the point where she tried contacting me through Skype, through email, through Messenger, through Facebook, all manner of ways, stalking me to the point where I just had to block her. But what she said was still out there. So what basically Erica did was, without doing her own due diligence and doing actual research, which she's beginning to be known for, or already has been known for not doing research or source checking, is check to see if the person who did that post had anything authentic or fact-based to say. So when that post had to be taken down for legal reasons, Erica didn't bother to check at all. She reposted it, and it ended up eventually becoming an empty post because, again, that information had to be taken down. Now, that's what I'm talking about.
At the original website where it was posted.
At the original website. So then Erica's reposting of that original website, fake information on me, ended up becoming empty, meaning there was no information to be had, because that information had to be deleted. It was a picture of me, which was fine, but information that was fake and lies, basically had no factual information about me whatsoever. And the post actually didn't even make sense. So when this mentally deranged individual starts talking, it just sounds like word salad.
Yeah.
And
that's a sign of psychosis.
It is, and the fact that they have 24 different profiles did not seem to make a difference to Erica whatsoever. If anything, I guess her personal feelings towards me, whatever they are, apparently it just encouraged her to do this post. So what ended up happening was Erica shopped around that slanderous post about me as though it were fact. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're putting someone's life and family at risk, because you're actually saying, hey, this is real, this is true about this person. That's just not fair to do. I have never, ever made a post about anyone unless it was based on fact. Now, I think it's important that everybody understands that Erica Lukes needs to come to the conclusion that she's either here to help us and lift us up in the UFO community and help continue on with the research and knowledge that we all desire and do on a regular, or is she going to continue acting in a nefarious manner, which she has been on a consistent basis, and not lift us up and bring us together? I personally believe
that'll never happen. I mean, it's a part of the profile. These people are incurable.
I understand.
And that's fine. That's fine.
Look, J. Allen Hynek did an about face in the UFO community, and I'm not saying she is no J. Allen Hynek. Okay, absolutely not. But for the sake of a parallel, for an example, wanted to say he was very brave and courageous regarding science. Now, can Erica Lukes be that brave regarding the social aspect of the UFO community Can she actually say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and attack the topic of ufology rather than people? I have yet to see that happen.
All right. Well, let's not do the whole show now.
Well, just so you know, Chase Kletsky is actually commenting here.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm glad that
I know.
she's here because, I have nothing but the greatest and deepest respect for her. And I also wanted to mention I was on the Dave Scott show. I was on a few of his shows. One of them, I actually quoted Chase Kletsky in a very respectful and admiring manner. Why? The reason why I did that is because she has spent a couple or more decades deeply embedded and involved in the UFO community, working her ass off and doing everything she can to base what she does on evidence and real research. Is something that Erica Lukes has yet to learn.
Well, there you go. All right. So, final message for me. Are you done? Are you finally done now?
I'm done.
All right. All right. I'm going to mute your mic so I can wrap the show.
You do it.
All right. So, great show. Thanks again to Dr. Michael Masters. Remember, Wednesday night, Alejandro Rojas. And a final message to all our friends and to Erica and her friends. I'm sick of your shit. You'll be hearing from me. Bye.